Every few years, somewhere in America, a politician stands at a podium in front of an orange excavator and says some version of the same sentence. This is the project that finally fixes traffic. A new lane, a new interchange, a new bypass around the bypass. The rendering behind them always shows the same thing. A wide, sunlit road with exactly 4 cars on it, gliding along like nothing has ever gone wrong on a highway in the history of highways. That image is the sales pitch. Smooth pavement, empty lanes, a commute that takes exactly as long as the map says it should. It's a real feeling people have chased for 100 years, and it's not a stupid thing to want. Nobody grows up dreaming about a 14-minute wait to merge onto a bridge. The problem isn't that the dream is fake. Wide roads are real. Faster pavement is real. The extra lane genuinely does carry more cars per hour the day it opens. The problem is what happens after the ribbon gets cut. And almost nobody at that podium shows you that part. Because here's the sentence that should be printed on every groundbreaking sign in the country. You cannot build your way out of traffic, and the data proving it is now 40 years old. The machine nobody shows you. Let's start with what you think you're buying when a city widens a highway. You think you're buying capacity. More room, same number of cars, faster trip, straightforward, physical, the kind of thing that should behave like a bathtub. Bigger drain, water leaves faster. Roads don't behave like bathtubs. They behave like markets, and markets respond to price. The price of driving on a given road at a given time isn't measured in dollars, it's measured in minutes. How long you'll sit there. When you widen a road, you lower that price. And when you lower the price of something, people buy more of it. This isn't a theory dreamed up by people who don't like cars. It has a name. It has 40 years of peer-reviewed data behind it, and economists gave it the bluntest possible title: the fundamental law of road congestion. They add lane capacity, and traffic volume rises to fill it. Almost exactly. Not eventually. Not in some vague long run. Consistently. And on a schedule you could set a watch to. Here's where it turns into real numbers instead of an abstract principle. The most expensive lesson ever poured in concrete Houston, early 2000s. The Katy Freeway, a stretch of Interstate 10 running about 30 miles from downtown out to the suburbs, was ranked as the second worst bottleneck in the nation, wasting 25 million hours of commuter time a year. The fix seemed obvious. Make it wider. Make it much wider. So Texas spent nearly $3 billion and turned it into a freeway, with 23 lanes at points. Good enough to be called the widest freeway in the world. A genuine engineering triumph. 26 lanes of concrete at its widest sections. Wide enough, as one write-up put it, that you can't make out what's on the other side. For a moment it worked. Travel times dropped. Highway boosters called it a resounding success. Then the data kept coming in. By 2014, 3 years after the widening finished, the morning commute had increased by 25 minutes, 30% longer than before the project, and the afternoon commute had increased by 23 minutes, 55% longer. Not slightly worse. Worse than before Texas spent $3 billion. One stretch of the freeway ended up taking up to 51% longer to drive than it did before the widening, and the gains had evaporated within a few years of opening, then kept heading the wrong way. Sit with that math for a second. 26 lanes, $3 billion, a 51% longer commute than the road it replaced. And Houston isn't the freak case. It's the textbook case, which means the same math shows up everywhere planners bothered to measure it. Across the 100 largest urbanized areas in the U.S., between 1993 and 2017, roughly 30,500 lane miles of freeway were added, a 42% increase in capacity. Population in those areas grew 32% over the same period. Traffic delays grew 144%. More capacity added faster than the population grew, and delay still nearly 2.5 times outpaced both. Houston itself is at the extreme end of that same table. Population up 77%, freeway lane miles up 28%, delays up 221%. And the worst case on record isn't even Houston, it's Brownsville, Texas, where a 73% population increase came with a 287% increase in freeway lane miles, and delays rose 1,230%. More than 12 times worse, after nearly quadrupling the road. Here's the thesis of this entire video in one sentence. The more lanes you build, the more precisely you can predict the traffic jam that's coming to fill them. why this isn't a coincidence. It's arithmetic. The formal name is induced demand, and once you see the mechanism, you can't unsee it in every widening project ever announced. A road's capacity sets a rough speed limit on how much pain people are willing to absorb to use it. When a commute takes 90 minutes each way, a certain number of people quietly opt out. Some move closer to work, some take transit, even a bad transit system, because it's at least predictable. Some shift their schedule to avoid the worst of it. Some just don't take that trip at all. They skip the errand, work from home, choose the closer store. All of those people are in latent demand. They're not on the road, but they want to be. And they're one improvement away from getting back on. Widen the highway, and the commute drops to 50 minutes. Every one of those people reevaluates. The person who moved further out for cheaper housing decides the new commute is tolerable again, so more people move further out, which is its own compounding problem, because now there's more distance for everyone to drive, permanently, embedded in where people choose to live. The transit rider gets back in the car because the highway is faster now. The person running errands stops trip chaining and makes 4 separate car trips instead of 1. Transportation economist Anthony Downs gave this a name back in the 1990s: triple convergence. Drivers converge onto the improved route from other roads. Drivers converge onto the improved route from other times of day, shifting out of off-peak hours into rush hour, because rush hour is no longer unbearable. And drivers converge onto the improved route from other modes entirely, out of buses, out of trains, off bikes. 3 separate pools of previously absorbed demand, all pouring back onto the same asphalt at once, because the price just dropped and everyone noticed. The freeway didn't get bigger than the demand for it. It got bigger, and the demand grew to match, because the demand was never actually fixed. It was priced out, and now it's priced back in. There's a companion piece to this that's even stranger. Brace's paradox, a mathematical result showing that in certain network conditions, adding a new road to an existing network can make the average travel time for everyone worse, not better. Because individual drivers optimizing for their own fastest route can collectively create a slower system than a more constrained one would have. It's been observed in real cities. New York City closed a portion of 42nd Street in 1990, and traffic engineers braced for chaos. Traffic flow in the area improved. Here's the reframe that should follow you out of this section. A highway isn't a pipe you fill with a fixed amount of water. It's a market that sets its own price. And every lane you add is a price cut nobody voted on. The other side of the ledger. So if adding capacity doesn't work, what does? This is where it gets interesting. Because the answer isn't build transit and hope. It's something with actual measured, audited, multi-year data behind it. Change the price directly, instead of changing the road. This is congestion pricing, and the flagship experiment for it in the United States just finished its first full year, with numbers good enough that even the program's harshest critics have mostly gone quiet. New York City started charging vehicles $9 to enter Manhattan below 60th Street during peak hours in January 2025. In the first 12 months, 27 million fewer vehicles entered the congestion relief zone, an 11% reduction in traffic, with crossing speeds up by as much as 51% at some entry points, and transit ridership up 7%. The program also generated $550 million in revenue for the Transit Authority in year 1, about $50 million more than projected. That's the headline. Here's the number that should actually stop you. An 11% reduction in vehicles produced a 51% increase in crossing speed at some points. That's not a rounding error, and it's not a coincidence either. It's the same mechanism as induced demand, running in reverse. Congestion isn't linear. Roads near their capacity ceiling are exquisitely sensitive to small changes in volume, because that's exactly where the triple convergence effect breaks down and stacks up. Take away 11 cars out of 100 at the worst possible moment, and you don't get an 11% improvement. You get the system falling out of gridlock entirely. The safety numbers move the same way. Traffic fatalities inside the toll zone dropped 40% in year 1. Crashes fell 7%. Injuries fell 8%. And for the first 6 months of the program, not a single motorist, passenger, moped rider, or motorcyclist died in a crash inside the zone. Citywide, New York recorded its fewest traffic deaths since record-keeping began in 1910. And the effect doesn't stay inside the tolled zone, which is the part planners were most nervous about. The fear that congestion pricing would just push the jam a few blocks outward and call it a win. The opposite happened. Highways near the zone saw 13% faster speeds, arterial roads 10% faster, and local roads 8% faster, with the improvement extending to roads well outside the tolled district, wherever a meaningful share of that road's traffic was headed into or through the zone anyway. Trips into the zone got about 8% faster. Trips leaving the zone got 2.5% faster, adding up to more than 10 saved hours a year for a hypothetical regular commuter. Even the side effects nobody explicitly priced in showed up. A Cornell study using 42 monitoring stations over 518 days found particulate pollution inside the zone dropped 22% in the first 6 months, with measurable reductions extending across all 5 boroughs and into the wider metro area. The pattern here rhymes with Houston, just running backward. Houston added supply and watched demand expand to eat it whole. New York added a price and watched demand contract to match. And once demand contracted even slightly, the speed of everything left on the road jumped disproportionately, because that's how congested systems behave near their tipping point in both directions. New York didn't invent this. It borrowed it from cities that ran the experiment decades earlier and never looked back. Singapore has priced road access into its downtown since 1975 and treats it as an uncontroversial utility bill at this point, not a political fight. Stockholm ran congestion pricing as a genuine 7-month trial in 2006, held a referendum afterward on whether to keep it, and voters, having actually experienced the lighter traffic, chose to make it permanent. London has run its congestion charge since 2003 and has expanded rather than repealed it. None of these cities solved traffic in the sense of returning to some empty highway fantasy. What they did was something more durable. They matched the number of cars wanting to be on the road, at that hour, to the number of cars the road could actually carry, and they used price instead of pavement to do it. So, can you actually fix it forever? Here's where the honest answer gets uncomfortable, because it's not the ending anyone wants. No road-based fix is permanent, in either direction. Congestion pricing in New York didn't shrink the demand for driving into Manhattan. It repriced it, continuously, in real time, and it will keep having to do that forever, because the underlying appetite for driving into a dense, valuable, job-rich island never actually goes away. The day the toll stops adjusting to demand is the day the traffic creeps back, exactly the way it always does when a price gets frozen while the market underneath it keeps moving. That's the part the highway widening crowd and the congestion pricing crowd actually agree on, whether they'd phrase it this way or not. Traffic isn't a problem you solve once. It's a system you manage continuously, and the only question is which lever you're willing to keep pulling. Pavement, which gets more expensive and less effective every time you pull it, or price, which gets cheaper to adjust and stays effective for as long as you keep adjusting it. Widening a highway is a lever you can only pull a handful of times before you run out of physical space, budget, or political tolerance for bulldozing neighborhoods. And Katy Freeway already shows you what happens on pull number 1. 26 lanes was close to the physical ceiling of what a corridor like that can hold, and it still lost the fight to induce demand within 3 years. There is no version of pull number 2 that ends differently, because the mechanism generating the traffic was never the number of lanes. It was the price of using them. Pricing is a lever you can pull every single day, in tiny increments, forever, because it's just a number on a sign that changes with demand, instead of 40 tons of asphalt that doesn't. That's the actual, unglamorous answer to the question in the title. You cannot fix traffic forever with a fixed asset, because traffic itself was never fixed. It was elastic the entire time, expanding and contracting to meet whatever price you set for it, whether that price was measured in minutes wasted or dollars charged. The cities that look like they solved traffic aren't the ones that stopped managing it. They're the ones that found a lever cheap enough, precise enough, and boring enough to keep pulling every single day without anyone needing to cut a ribbon. The politician in front of the excavator is selling you a ribbon cutting. The actual fix doesn't have a ribbon. It has a toll gantry, updated pricing every 15 minutes, and a transit system that has to be good enough to be the alternative people actually choose, not the one they're stuck with. It's less exciting to announce. It doesn't photograph as well, and unlike the rendering with 4 cars sliding down an empty highway, it's the only version of this story that the data actually backs up.